I'm joined here by Olivier Schwab, who is the Managing Director and also head of the biggest business engagement with the World Economic Forum. Sir, welcome to our program.
Good afternoon, Tianwei.
Long time no see.
Yes.
I saw you in Beijing some years ago. You were there covering the Chinese business side, and now you're moving to the business development. Let me ask you a question about that. How do you see the business engagement this time and their views about leadership reflected at the World Economic Forum?
Absolutely. So, as you know, we have at the World Economic Forum, we have 1,000 business partners.
Yes.
These are, for the most part, large companies, but we also have some young tech pioneers, which are innovative companies, entrepreneurs, and they are part of our business ecosystem. For us, it's very important that the business takes a leadership in all of the issues which we address.
We're going to talk about the leadership issue a bit later, but for now, they all, together with us, listen to Mr. Liu He's speech coming from China, talking about 1 year on since President Xi Jinping's speech last year, which enlightened a lot of delegates at the World Economic Forum. What about 1 year later? Do you think he delivered a confident message?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very honored to have Liu He with us as a continuation of last year's address by President Xi. By the way, we have a very good Chinese delegation this year, both from business and from government,
led by
exactly led by Liu He. And for us, what was particularly encouraging was to hear his message about the implementation now of some of the policies around opening, particularly in the financial sector and in the manufacturing sector.
I guess a lot of those in the business community coming over here, they seem to have got the message.
Absolutely.
Talking about China's development, China has very short-term development and as long as longer-term visions. 3 years, that's what Mr. Liu is talking about, the three issues, poverty, environmental protection, together with financial risks, and also opening up. So how do you see those likely to help us understand what China is having in mind?
Well, I think the topics that were discussed today, that were addressed today, are not necessarily new, right? I think the imperative around particularly taking strong leadership in the climate agenda, which was highlighted by President Xi last year, and again today, are topics that show China's presence on the international stage and collaboration on the international stage around some of these key global topics which we all need to get together to in order to address.
This year World Economic Forum, Olivier, is very strong in the sense of inviting world leaders, particularly from the G20 countries, and they are also going to meet eventually President Trump coming from the United States. And many wonder what's likely to happen at the end of this week. But you see very different leadership style these days when it comes to politics and international governance. How does the World Economic Forum, particularly from your perspective, see that differences?
Yeah. So we have this year, we have 65 heads of state, heads of government from across the world.
Think about the security.
And I think it shows the need and the sort of the value that these governments attach to coming together in a space where they can meet with their peers, with business leaders, with government, with non-government organizations, with international organizations, right? We have 6 of the 7 G7 countries represented at the highest level. And to answer your question, Davos and the World Economic Forum is a place of dialogue. So we want people to come with different ideas and different mindsets, because that's what ultimately allows us to create solutions for a better future.
Which means when people are fired up in the Congress Hall, you guys are very happy.
Well, as I said, I mean, we want to bring different opinions together. We want to bring the different stakeholders together, because we believe that it is through this mix. Because you see, the fundamental principle of the World Economic Forum is that no single actor alone can address the big issues of this world, not the business community, not the policymakers, not the NGOs. It's only in creating a platform where you bring these actors together that you can progress.
But at the end of the day, the theme for this year is about a shared future.
Exactly.
But people are a little bit concerned whether a shared future will be created, at least a vision about that will be created at the end of the day.
Well, that is our dream.
When you say a dream, is it too big, or is it just the right?
No, it's absolutely achievable. Absolutely achievable, and you know, it's about bringing the right ingredients. It's you know, about a recipe, if you will.
Yes.
And you have to bring the right ingredients. You have to provoke the change, and that's what we try to do as a platform.
Fundamental differences, if I could invite your personal opinion, as an instrumental person of the World Economic Forum. I mean, on the one hand, there are very different understanding of globalization, very different understanding about what political leadership should be about. Some combine entertainment with governance. Others think about looking at the world as a whole. So very different ways of looking at things. Would that be reconciled with one forum?
Yeah. So, you know, the theme of this annual meeting is creating a shared future in a fractured world.
Right.
So it's a recognition that the world is indeed fractured. There are social fractures, there are income gaps, there are generational fractures, right? And so how do we come together? How do we address some of these fractures? And what are some of the solutions that we can bring to the table? That's what the forum is about. To answer your question, Davos is, of course, the summit where everything comes together, but our partners engage with us throughout the year on workshops on the 14 big issues which we've identified. These are our 14 system initiatives. I mentioned some earlier: trade, climate change, health, social inclusion, and so on. And so this is a work that takes place throughout the year.
The other thing I really want to ask you is really about technology.
Yes.
You have been putting your heart early on from the World Economic Forum on technology side. You've been working with entrepreneurs for years. So the technology, now the discussion is not about technology development. It's more about the ethical issue, the legal issue. Will we come up with some kind of plan? Absolutely.
So you're absolutely right. The big questions today are twofold, right? How do we make all this technology which is disrupting us available not to a few elite, but really to the whole of humankind, number one. And number two, how do we harness the positive aspects of, say, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, and mitigate the risks of these new technologies. So for that, we have created in San Francisco the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution. In the center, we look specifically at a certain set of technologies, and we ask ourselves exactly these questions. And we try to come up with guidelines or protocols, if you will, that we will make available to the public.
Are there already something available?
Absolutely. So we have launched a project in Rwanda. You know, Rwanda has an initiative for delivery of blood via drones in remote areas. And in working together with them and actors from the private sector, we were able to make policy recommendations that are now being implemented.
But people would say cultural difference. You know, there's also national difference when it comes to technology, use of technology. So how would one size fit all? That would be the question. That's the question come to you.
Exactly. So I think a typical example is when we talk about cross-border data flows, right? So how is the regulation that you use for data in one jurisdiction, how does that apply in the next jurisdiction? I'll give you an example. If you drive your autonomous vehicle from one country to the next, what happens to the data in terms of the regulations, right? And these are exactly the type of issues we're trying to address there and find common solutions.
But that is one little experiment that you do with the World Economic Forum, and yet you need to rally all these players in different fields, particularly players that are suspicious of one another. Think about the tech companies these days, bigger even than some of the national government, but some of the industry are very scared of them. They don't want to share anything with them. So you need to bring all these conflicting players together. How could that be done?
So, you know, with the World Economic Forum, we've built the trust of the business community and the governments over 48 years
well, you
now.
could say so, but that was a trust before. What about now?
Well, you know, I think we do have that trust from our communities, and I do think this is why they are eager to engage with us and look at some of these issues.
Having said that, though, how do you think Chinese companies, particularly tech companies, are coming into this discussion? Some of the issues in China, of course, are very different from, let's just say, what people are talking about here.
No, so we have some of the leading technology entrepreneurs from China who've been engaged with us for quite some time. Just to name a few, Huawei, Alibaba, JD.com, who just joined us. These companies are extremely active globally, and we welcome them on our platform, and they indeed leverage our platform to make these global connections and work with us on some of the issues that we all face.
It's great to see Huawei, Google, and Tencent, they could all work together under one roof.
Exactly.
Given some of the issues we have seen over the years.
Exactly.
But before we go, one important question. World Economic Forum, you aspire to be an international organization, made that transition already, but there are a lot of issues that it seems that public-private partnership still needs to be resolved before it becomes a reality. Tell us how you're going to do it.
Yeah. So what we do really is we're a catalyst for action, right?
Okay.
So as I mentioned earlier, we sort of create the recipe. We bring the right leaders together from business, from government, from civil society, the expert groups, and we try to find some of the solutions to the most pressing problems we have today. I mentioned two initiatives earlier that were spun out of that activity. I could mention another, which is already a little bit older, which is Gavi, the Global Alliance Against Vaccination and Immunization, which was incubated at the forum. And then became an independent entity. So this is typically the type of work which we do with all our global participants.
Olivier Schwab, wonderful to see you here in Davos, just as it was wonderful to see you and work with you in Beijing years ago.
It's a pleasure to see you again.
Thank you so much, sir, for being with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.